Los Angeles, where he has taught for the past 13 years. He is the founder of Words Uncaged, which is a platform for incarcerated artists and writers to engage with the public through book publishing, art exhibits, and digital media. Bidan is also currently the faculty director of the first in-prison degree program at Los Angeles County Prison, Lancaster, and he researches new pedagogical approaches to teaching in prison. He currently serves on the boards of California Humanities and rapper YG's foundation 400 Ways. Bidan's proudest achievement is that of the 67 LWOP, which stands for Life Without the Possibility of Parole, of the 67 LWOP commutations issued in California by former Governor Jerry Brown, 13 or 20% had participated in Words Uncaged programs while they were in prison and had support letters written on their behalf by the organization. Next, we have Angelica Perez. Angelica Perez is an enthusiastic and hardworking member of Bakersfield College. She currently serves as program manager of the Inmate Scholars Program through Bakersfield College. In this role, she's responsible for facilitating face-to-face and correspondence courses for 5 state prisons throughout Kern County and Kings County. Prior to this position, she has worked with different populations of people in the educational, nonprofit, and military settings. These populations range from the average student, veterans, veteran dependents, the homeless, and individuals who are suffering from mental illness and substance abuse. Angelica is a CSUB graduate with a master's in administration, and she believes there's no perfect formula to success, but she's committed to those experiencing adversity to achieve their dream of success. And we also have Dr. Kyle Robertson with us tonight. Dr. Kyle Robertson holds a PhD in philosophy from UC Santa Cruz and a JD from UC Berkeley. And in 2015, he co-founded the Center for Public Philosophy at UC Santa Cruz. He has a passion for all things public philosophy, including high school ethics bowl programs, teaching inside San Quentin State Prison, and philosophy for children. He regularly speaks on public philosophy topics and publishes on the challenges of doing public philosophy. He's also a lecturer in the philosophy department at UC Santa Cruz. All right, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight, panel. Okay, so let's move to the conversation and the first question. So there are many types of educational programming in prisons, and each of you are engaged in a unique program. Can you please tell us what your program is, what it aims to achieve, and where it operates? Let's first start with Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Kaylee. Well, there's two aspects of how I work in prisons. One is with Words Uncaged, which is it's affiliated to Cal State LA, but it's its own nonprofit. And because of that, it doesn't have all the, I want to say restrictions because that makes it sound negative, but it doesn't have all the implications of being a university program, but it's connected to it. So it's a kind of sister program. And so with that program, we're statewide, mainly in Southern California, but we're in a number of different prisons throughout Southern California, Donovan, Calipatria, LAC, CMC, a few others, the women's prison as well. And with the idea behind that is using art, narrative, stories, language in general as a vehicle for reimagining your life, really, and then also expressing that, sharing that with others in order to be seen differently than, so many people are defined by one act, however bad that act may have been. And there's a lot more to people than that. So the idea is to open up those kind of hidden or submerged narratives. And then the BA program is much more traditional. It's the first in California since, Pell Grants were taken away at the late 80s, in the 90s, in-person degree program and that is run out of LAC in Lancaster.
Great, thank you. Angelica?
Hi, so Bakersfield College is a community college where we offer incarcerated individuals the opportunity to earn a transferable associate's degree or certificate of communication while they're incarcerated. Back in 2015, when we pulled the data for this, we were expecting at 2025 that about 41% of jobs are going to need a degree. At the same time, there was the legislature that was releasing incarcerated individuals, which was reducing their felonies down to misdemeanors and reducing their time sentences. So there were individuals being released from prison at a pretty rapid rate. And there were California counties that just weren't prepared to take in these individuals. And as a result of that, most of them were likely to reoffend and go back to prison. For those of you who aren't familiar with Bakersfield, we are in Kern County. And at that time, we currently had 10 prisons that were composed of private and state prisons. And that's not even including the jails and the juvenile hall facilities. So that's a lot of people that we were expecting to come our way. So Bakersfield College took on the challenge to try to address this issue and address it before these individuals are released. So in 2015, we started with one class on 1 yard at Kern Valley State Prison in Delano with 21 students, and it had exploded. At the peak of our programming, we were in 10 prisons, 8 in Kern County and 2 in Kings County. So we've definitely come a long way, and our program has experienced a lot of changes throughout the year when it comes to programming, state legislature. Just this past year, we had to deal with the pandemic, and the year before that, we had private prisons closing. So there's a lot of things that affect our program. And because we serve such a vast variety of prisons, we've just rolled with the punches, but we do it because we believe in giving people second chances. This directly affects our communities and those that are around us. So we want to invest in those and give them a chance to succeed upon release and not reoffend. We want to create productive, successful members of society.
Great, thank you. And Kyle, same question.
Sure. So the program I wanted to talk about today, I volunteer with Mount Tamalpais College, which used to be called the Prison University Project inside San Quentin. So what I was able to do there, I'm now the co-coach of the debate program. I helped create an ethics bowl debate program for their school. So they are accredited now, or I think their technical title is candidate for accreditation community college inside of San Quentin. And so it was about 4 years ago, they reached out wanting to start a debate program. And I was able to pitch them on an alternative format called the Ethics Bowl. So we've done it 3 years now, and we bring in college teams from around the Bay Area to compete against them. So a lot of what I do is I have the UCSC team, which I've coached for 12 years now, and teams from San Jose State and Stanford that come in, and we have public events, debates inside San Quentin.
That sounds exciting. Okay, great. Thank you all for introducing us to your programs and the work that you're doing. So I'd like to now ask, what inspired you to work in prison education programming, and why is this work so essential? We can go with Dr. Roy again. Let's keep the flow.
Well, the story of kind of how I first went in, I was actually part of a dog rescue program. I was the chairman of a dog rescue program, and we started the first dog rescue program in a prison at LAC. And what was really interesting about that was, pretty much from the minute I stepped in, it was a world I didn't really know a lot about, to be quite honest, before I went in. Except for reading Foucault, and it just became like a responsibility. Once I'd met the people, I I couldn't not do this, basically, in a way. And how all this started was we started by writing about the reflecting upon the experience of training dogs and touching a dog for the first time. And you know, I remember quite vividly a couple of people, one gentleman in particular who had been incarcerated for over 40 years, and he'd never touched a sentient being for 40 something years that was not in some kind of, you know, violent act or something like that. And it physically sort of broke him down. You could see this experience happening. And so we try to put that into words, and we try to put language to that, and to understand those experiences and to share those experiences with others. You know, once you've kind of had that sort of experience yourself, you realize that there are so many people that are just kind of thrown away that have tremendous value. And the question becomes, you know, what's your relationship, what's your responsibility to these people that are largely invisible to, you know, lots of people's everyday lives, except in these kind of, you know, often sensationalized representations. And so for me, the responsibility came to serve them in some kind of way, to create this platform, not to speak for anyone, but to kind of create avenues for others to have that kind of experience in some way, through some kind of, you know, artistic medium where we could approximate that. Because I think once you can do that, then these systems that we have become sort of untenable or intolerable, because you realize that there are these kind of invisible spaces of tremendous dehumanization, and we're funding them as taxpayers as well.
Wow, thank you. Well said. Angelica?
So I would say there's actually two experiences that kind of led me down the path where I'm at. And let me just preface by saying, I never in my wildest dreams thought I would ever be working in a program like this, working with the population that I'm working with. But just to take a few years back down the road, in 2013, I was actually in the military, and my occupation at the time was military police. With that being said, I was doing stuff that wasn't necessarily my occupation. So at the time in 2013, I was stationed in Guantanamo Bay, doing corrections. And what I thought was really interesting there was that they had educational programming put in place for the detainees. And we all know the stigma of Guantanamo Bay, and I'm sure at a certain point it was a certain way. But at that point in time, the military acknowledged that, you know, if when they're there for long periods of time, they need mental stimulation. Anyone would, in order to maintain compliance, maintain sanity, maintain discipline. You have to be able to give them something to look forward to give them something going day to day. Now, the educational programming there wasn't the same as your average college. There wasn't large group settings of students. It was more maybe 1 to 3 students, and the classes were basically upon request. So there was a lot of different languages offered. There was art classes, philosophy, depending what the individual had requested. So I thought it was really interesting there how they made education available. It wasn't anything to withhold. And it always stuck with me. I thought, what a great thing. And then about 3-4 years down the road, I'm working for Bakersfield College, actually in the admissions and records setting. And I happened to go to, I believe it was Chaffey College, where I heard the director at the time of the Inmate Scholars Program, her name was Chelsea Esquivias, give the most amazing speech about the most amazing program that was being offered through Bakersfield College, where I'm working. And I just thought it was so amazing to see that type of work being implemented in my own home of California, in Kern County. And I always thought, man, I thought it would be such a great opportunity to be a part of that. But it was a very small program. And, you know, there's only so much I could do at the role that I was in. I was just an admissions and records technician, but an opportunity came up for a program manager position, and I took it. And Apparently they really loved my enthusiasm, my passion for it, and I got the position, and I've never regretted it a day since. I love what I do. I love working with the population I work with, and I love seeing the success stories.
That's great. I will be asking you about some of those success stories a little bit later on. Great. Dr. Robertson?
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned in my bio, I'm a former lawyer. So I had been around prisons some. I mean, I was a corporate lawyer, but I did pro bono cases, appellate advocacy for incarcerated people. So when I went to philosophy, I was always maybe a little more comfortable or thinking about people who are incarcerated. But I really kind of fell sideways into it. I had tried to start a bunch of programs in local county jail and really struggled. County jail is really hard to work in. I can talk about that if you'd like. Um, and a former student of mine, I'm proud to say, so somebody who was an undergraduate at UC Santa Cruz, was volunteering with the Prison University Project, heard they wanted to start a debate program, and told me I had to call them. So I talked to the directors and sort of pitched them on Ethics Bowl as an alternative to forensic debate. And that's how it started. I immediately fell in love with working there. I mean, so in terms of, part of your question is what inspires me. I just get a ton out of working with these students. Like, I love talking about applied ethics with them. And in terms of not just for me, but for others, I think hearing in their own words, like letting them speak to not just issues about incarceration, but everyday ethical issues we're all facing is exceptionally powerful, right? When we go to the San Quentin Chapel and we have 100 people spectating a debate round and hearing these incarcerated students say what they think about free speech, right? Or any other ethical issue of the day, I think it's an exceptionally powerful moment. So one of the things I do try and do is pick cases that don't have to do with incarceration, right? It's not just asking them what it's like to be in prison, but it's talking to incarcerated people as, fellow citizens, people who might have an unusual or unique perspective and insight into the world.
Great, thank you. Awesome. So next I'd like to ask, so there are several ways that people can understand the impact of prison education. So is there a particular story that really demonstrates this impact and why it is important to support it? Dr. Roy, if you have.
Sorry. I'll try and keep them short, but can I say two? Because there's two different ones that spring to mind.
Of course, yes, please.
So the first one that springs to mind is one of in our first cohort of when we started the BA, we started it without funding initially and without the support of the university. We just started doing classes and then eventually talked the university into ponying up some money and making them credit classes. And the person that was there from the very beginning, Alan Barnett, one of the effects of him taking college classes was that his daughter, who wasn't thinking of going to college or had all these doubts about going to college, saw him doing it. And she's now just graduating from Cal State LA as well. So I think the kind of ripple effects of this on someone's network cannot be underestimated. And he's not the only one, but there are other cases like that. And then the second kind of thing that springs to mind is the Words Uncaged one. And really one of the kind of premises behind Words Uncaged is a sort of model of restorative justice as opposed to just punitive justice. So we had two life without parole former incarcerated men, Tobias Tubbs and Janae Quinney, who got commuted by Governor Brown, and they've been out a couple of years now. They were obviously not expecting to get out. They'd done, Tobias had done like almost 30 years in prison. And we've created this program with another, a younger, formerly incarcerated former gang member, Anthony McDuffie. We've created this program of narrative healing in South LA. So what's happened is you have people that were incarcerated that are now coming back to South LA and are working with young kind of gang adjacent. I guess they're gang members, but they're not, you know, if they don't take a different turn, they're going to end up exactly where these guys ended up. And they're coming out to kind of heal their community and to stop others taking their path. And I think when you kind of think about these, you know, incarcerated human beings in this way, not as these problems, you know, to be solved, but as these assets. Because I can't go to South LA and get a bunch of 15-year-old gang members to listen to me and say, do this. At some point, you know, we can, and then they come up to campus and they can see that kind of thing. But really, we've created the program, but it's them that deserve all the credit for doing that. And we're doing it in partnership with GRID, which is the gang reduction program in Los Angeles. Hopefully as this kind of pilot program that will be an alternative to sending kids to juvenile hall, and they're sort of living and embodying this alternative model of how we can respond to harm caused rather than just locking people up and throwing away the key.
Thank you. I had never really thought about the ripple effect, and I hope we get the chance to hear a little bit more about that pilot program a little bit later on. But Angelica?
Okay, so my story actually, I wouldn't say isn't just about one student, but a whole cohort of students, which was actually our first graduating class from our program. So they weren't necessarily the very first class that we started with, but they're at the same prison. They were at Kern Valley B Yard, and those students, they wanted the program so bad, so bad. And I remember they used to ask our director, at the time, Chelsea Esquibius, how much that they wanted to be a part of it, and they were dedicated to the program, and they definitely put their money where their mouth was. And in all transparency too, and I think my colleagues here can agree, there has been no book written for us. We're either, you know, building the plane as we fly, or we're trying to best, you know, access other colleges to find out what they're doing. But as you realize, every prison operates differently. And we were really transparent with those students, and they were transparent with us that we were going to get through this together. As a college, there's sometimes that we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to do our best to address them. And those students were just so loyal and working with us all the way. And they were more than just students. They really became a part of our everyday lives, and we really invested in who they are, where they came from, what their goals are. Many of them never thought that they would, you know, graduate with a degree, live as long as they have, or have accomplished as many things as they've been a part of. And so it's hard to just give one story, but there's overlapping themes of where our program has helped improve their relationships with family members, with friends. They're able to create a better example for younger generations within their family, to let them know that, one, you can change at any point, two, to value education, and three, to really value your support systems and build upon those. So the first degree path we had actually implemented with our program was communication. And I know it was a tough sell to students at first, because they're like, what am I going to use that for? But with the skills that they've gained with those classes, they're able to articulate themselves much more, for a communication class, better than they had in the past. So they had better relations with their family, with custody staff, and with each other. And within prison, there's, you know, different boundaries that, you know, us on the outside aren't generally used to. And with them, they were breaking barriers every day, racial lines within the classrooms, talking with staff. It's really amazing to see. And they've become model students, and they definitely would regulate each other too. You know, as far as behavior or even grades, you know, they have a reputation to keep up, and anything below a 3.8 is not happening. They knew they were the class to beat. And even just throughout our program at other prisons, the students want to know who's the top performing class that semester. So it's just so great to see. And those are just the stories that are inside. Once they come out, and that's the best part, is there's students who never thought that they would come out, and then just one day, their file was reviewed. The parole board is like, let's give it a go. And students are getting released and now they're on campus and they're self-identifying too. They're letting us know, I was a part of the Inmate Scholars Program and I love it and I want to continue my education. And whether it's through us or a baccalaureate level program elsewhere, we're excited for them. We definitely want them to achieve their dreams, and we definitely want them to tell us about it too. And we love inviting them back to events where they can talk to faculty and other students so people can see the product of what's being done. Because it's not just us, it's the facilities, the prisons, the students, the staff that are working in the prison and outside the prison, and everyone advocating for them on the outside. So there's just so many stories out there, and I wish I can give credit to all of them, but it's just such a great group of people, and the stories are going to keep coming, and these students are going to keep coming out on top and shining.
Wow, that is so wonderful. Thinking of the impact, it's more than just getting a degree. It's very far reaching. So awesome. Thank you. And then Dr. Robertson.
Well, sure. I was thinking of different stories as the other folks were talking. I was like, oh, can I tell one that's like a different kind of impact? Because I have some similar stories too. But I'll tell you one, like, I think one of the things that higher education can offer, at least particularly in the context of debate, right? Ability to express your ideas in a public reason form, like a way that's responsive to the ideas that are circulating in our society, right? On my campus, we talk a lot about prison abolition, right? And mass incarceration. But one of the things that I've been able to do because of this program is bring a formerly incarcerated student who was on the debate team the first year I did it. He comes to campus and speaks to 500 undergraduates every fall, at least pre-COVID. We'll try and get back to it post-COVID. And I don't take any credit for his exceptional ability to speak, but I think higher education in prison should take a lot of credit for it. Like his ability to access books and education and mentors and teachers. It's an incredibly compelling personal account that he can tell and talk to these kids about what it's like, what mass incarceration actually does to you. So that's, 500 random undergrads at UCSC getting that personal sort of kind of breaking down some of the ideas about what prison is. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to talk with somebody who's formerly incarcerated. Be like, he sounds just like my professor. This individual is my age, right? We both grew up in Northern California in different cities, I think he, in a different life, could be in my position. Absolutely, be a faculty member somewhere. So that's my story for now.
Very important thing to learn and be exposed to, for sure. Okay, great. So now I know some of you have touched on this a little bit, but maybe you've thought of something a little bit different. But thinking back to when you were first involved in creating and implementing your program, do you recall any particular challenges that stood out in that process?
Well, I think when I think back to when I first got involved, it was, I think, 2013, so about eight years ago. And in a good way, I've noticed the sea change happen in that relatively short period. The first thing was people weren't really interested, at that time, and took a lot of convincing and a lot of kind of just not shutting up, really, to get people even interested in the idea of education in prison outside of very small kind of circles. And so, and I was lucky enough at my university to have the director of community engagement, and then eventually the president and the provost became very supportive, and that enabled the kind of institutionalized version to come. But in terms of the kind of challenges aside from that, funding was a big issue at that time. Again, that's kind of changed a little bit now, with the Second Chance Pell Grants now coming out, which is again a sea change. But we had to raise the money ourselves to start with, and that was its own burden. And then I think the biggest challenge was the kind of culture on the prison yard, in terms of, I really try to put myself in the mind of the prison guards as best I could, even though, I saw the world totally differently to they saw it. But when I try to put myself in their position, I kind of saw prison as this thing where success is nothing happening. So if you're a prison guard and nothing happens on your shift, you know, you've had a good day. So when you introduce a new variable, it causes kind of, you know, a challenge to that, or it causes some uncertainty that can happen. So the first few years, really, it was developing trust and really just, yeah, trust, and the trust that came from just always showing up, and not really giving up when you were told no. And then there was something changed, and you know, now we've got a slightly different culture on that yard. And yeah, but that, I think, was the difficult thing, because even if Sacramento or the governor says they want this, if you don't have the person that's opening the door on board in some kind of way, then it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter who you've got saying for this to happen. So in the earlier days, there was a lot of stuff where it was simple things like someone refusing to open the door to let the class in, or things like that. And certainly in the first 2 years, I just did a lot of classes in the workout yard with, you know, people doing pull-ups around, because we couldn't actually get into classrooms. So now it's not, you know, not like that. But those were the first things. And I think that kind of cultural shift is the biggest lift.
Wow, I'm Angelica and Dr. Robertson. I'm sure you've experienced similar challenges, but are there any others that come to mind, some pressing challenges you faced?
So for the Inmate Scholars Program, we were fortunate to be grant funded. So we fortunately didn't have that obstacle. And I wasn't there for the actual inception of the program in 2015, but in 2018, one of our biggest obstacles, of course, was recruiting faculty. And one of the big things was their concerns with the student population. I think a lot of people had it in their mind. It's almost just like a public school setting. Anyone here gets classes and whatever. And in all actuality, the education system is very different inside the prison. As you can imagine, there's people there that are operating just at totally different levels. You have some individuals that are, you know, at middle school level where they need to catch up with their education, some that are at high school level. And then those that enter our program actually either have a high school diploma or a GED. So the prison actually implemented that process for Bakersfield College so that the students are ready to take college level courses. So that's the first step when they're being pre-screened is to make sure they meet that requirement. In addition to that, they also have to be pre-screened by the staff just to make sure that they're on their best behavior, that is nothing conflicted with their work schedules or other obligations that they have going on. And that some prisons had actually implemented systems maybe where they had essays where students really had to state why they were going to be a good candidate to be in the program. So the students that really wanted to be there were going to be in our program. So we had to do a lot of work to try to make that common knowledge at our college. So I think that was one of more of the taboo things that we had to deal with. There was just the stereotype of what our student population was like. And what we even started doing for faculty as well that were interested in teaching for our program was offering to let them shadow one of our current teachers so they get the experience of what it is to go inside, prepare for the class, meet the students, instruct the class, and then go home for the day. And usually after that happened, they were sold. So, and then the other taboo part, I guess that was hard for faculty was just the whole process of being in a prison. So a lot of times they're driving an hour out of their way. Parking is not ideal. They have to come inside, leave all their technology in their vehicle. They have to get searched. And in our program too, technology is plentiful in some areas and other areas not. Yes, you can get your laptop approved to go into the prisons, but you have no internet capabilities. So you're doing death by PowerPoints and you have to be as fun and engaging as possible. And you can't just be spontaneous and decide, hey, today's going to be a movie day. Everything has to be cleared beforehand. And then, of course, your classroom is never conveniently located right next to the door. So there's a lot of travel back and forth, and whatever you bring with you, you got to bring back. but the journey is just so worth it when you get to see with your students, because when you teach inside there, you realize your students are going on a journey themselves just to get to class, but they're just as excited to see our faculty as our faculty is excited to see them. So again, a part of the kind of the job shadowing for our program, the oncoming faculty got to see that, and that really helped motivate them. And I think when we took some of the mystery of operating, in a prison away, that's what really helped the whole taboo of everything. Our partners have been really helpful at CDCR. They've allowed us to have certain events inside the prisons where we've had debates, we've had a Japanese song recital, we've had a graduation in there, and they've invited members of our community, college community, to attend these events. And it's just been a real eye-opening for experience for a lot of people, where they either want to come teach for our program or help bring student services in, or just become an advocate for our program. So again, I think our CDCR partners were really crucial in helping us make that less taboo for everyone.
Excellent. Dr. Robertson, I know you've probably had many similar challenges.
Well, I'll say, actually working at San Quentin, I'm kind of volunteering with an organization that has done most of these things for me already, right? The challenges you all are talking about. So I'll tell you something that I've been surprised by, that I didn't expect, which is how hard it has been to convince some of my students, incarcerated students, to be willing to risk failing. So, this is a debate, right? So it's like, you're on stage, you have judges that are scoring you, and you might lose. This is much harder for them than I expected. And I've talked to them about it, so the first year we had the sort of brave guys who were willing to do it, and they did really well and they won. And the next year, there weren't many people beyond that initial group that were willing to do it, because they were terrified they weren't good enough. They were going to lose, right? That they would tell me, look, we've been put up on, we've lost everything. Like, I can't imagine representing San Quentin and going up and then losing. That would have been so hard for them. So we've had to try and think about, how do we de-escalate the risk, like make it more open and inclusive, and while still keeping it the debate, because part of the excitement though is there is a debate and it is scored, and they have all their a lot of other incarcerated students come and watch and spectate. But I didn't expect I would have to grapple with that. It's ongoing, and I haven't solved it yet. My co-coaches and I haven't solved it yet.
Wow, yeah, that ties into what Angelica was saying. It's very competitive, and you want your reputation to be good, and if you fear losing, I can see how that would impact the program.
Yeah, and there's a sense in that you're representing the whole institution, right? So if you lose, you're going to catch it on the yard for months, right? Like, you're gonna, yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine that if a student at CSUB, if they had that kind of repercussion if they didn't pass a class? It'd be scary. Okay, thank you, panel, for this insightful discussion so far. Now I'd like to move on to, we've gotten a bunch of questions in the Q&A, but first I'd like to ask Natalie Velasco, a current Masters of Public Administration student at CSUB and KIE student fellow, who is very interested and does research in this area of education in prison, to start us off with the first question. So Natalie, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so my question is that in some cases, providing education to people who are incarcerated is viewed as controversial. And some people argue that devoting resources to people who are incarcerated amounts to a privilege that is not merited. How do you encounter and respond to those objections? And this question's for anyone who would like to answer. Dr. Roy, would you like to go first?
Oh, hey, Natalie, I remember you now from your thesis. Yeah, hi.
Yes, I see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. Well, I think that you can probably tell that I didn't grow up in this country. I actually became a naturalized citizen last week. So I say this as a kind of insider and outsider at the same time. But I grew up in England at a time when higher education was free. And I'm from a single parent immigrant family that there's no way I would have gone to university if I hadn't had free education at that time. So what that did is I have a totally different worldview, and embedded in that question to me are two kind of assumptions that I don't see in, you know, in my worldview. I'd say the first is that incarcerated students are a different category of people. I don't agree with that. I think they're human beings who did something and are incarcerated, and it's not a category of distinction of any significance to me for education. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then the second thing I'd say is that education, I don't see it as a privilege as much as a or a product or a consumer thing, as much as you know, a kind of maybe I don't know what the right word is, but it should be an opportunity open to everyone who has a desire and the ability to pursue it. So I think the problem is not with educating incarcerated people. I think the problem is how we do education in the rest of our society. That's the real issue. And if we address that, this special category wouldn't be an issue.
Wow, thank you so much. Angelica?
Okay, so what I generally tell people is I kind of use the numbers approach in a way. So on average, the California taxpayer pays about $81,000, you know, a year per state prison in California. And for those of you that don't know, there's about 35 state prisons, so that comes out to a pretty penny. And on top of that, most of that funding actually goes towards just running the prisons, and then just to go towards the pay and benefits of the staff that are there as well. So very little is actually spent directly related to those that are incarcerated, or programming that's related to them as well. So the state is just not in a position to continue funding mass incarceration and lengthy sentences that don't necessarily make sense. And we're starting to see that as the legislature that's changing within California, that's reducing sentences. We had a lot of individuals get released, compassionate release due to COVID. It just doesn't make sense to keep all these people incarcerated, which is why we want to get them ready for re-entry into society before they're released, because you never know what events or legislature is going to come around the corner and change that. And so that's the big thing I like to tell people. And again, besides just getting them ready for a degree, we're giving them skills ready to re-enter society. And studies show that those individuals that have been prepared to re-enter society are less likely to re-offend. And a lot of that does have to do with the job skills they gain, whether it's through a associate's or baccalaureate or a trade skill program while they're incarcerated. So it just makes sense to invest into these individuals because they're going to come back to our community.
Yeah, thank you. That was really well said. Dr. Robertson, do you have anything else to add?
They took my two answers, but I'll just say that I'm serious. Like, those are great answers, and I give both of those. That, like, I actually think this question is really serious. Like, there's a documentary on the Bard Prison Initiative where there's this scene where the mother of one of the students says this, right? And she's like, I have two daughters, one who's in her 20s and not incarcerated and can't make enough money to put food on the table, like, let alone go to college. And the other one who's here and is a student at Bard. And then there's this sense of injustice in that the daughter who committed a crime gets a private education. I feel that. I'm like somewhat, I just feel the weight of that mother's question. So at least for me, I have an easy response, which is like, who else do you want me to work with? Like, I have the luxury of helping to run a center where I do work with kids, and I do if there's anyone you want me to teach ethics bowl to, like, tell me who they are. I'd love to do it, right? So, like, for example, we started a Spanish language ethics bowl for the Central Coast to serve migrant education students and the like. So it's kind of a similar answer to Dr. Roy, where I think the problem is more with how we see education outside of prisons and not inside.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to shift it back to Dr. McCullough now, but it was nice seeing you guys. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Okay, so we'll just move on to some of the other questions that we've gotten from the attendees. So first, a question from Pat Smith. And Angelica, you talked a little bit about this on some of the things that people experience as benefits of being educated and experiencing education, but this one's more geared towards different successes that formerly incarcerated people experience upon release, and what can they do with college education gained while they were incarcerated. Did you want to say?
I'm so sorry. Can you please repeat that? I caught half the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, of course. So Pat Smith asks basically what type of success are formerly incarcerated people experiencing upon release from prison with their college education that they gained while incarcerated?
So the statistics are a little harder to gather other than the personal success stories. So once our students come out, there's not really a tracking system in place just to catch them. In fact, there was a really big initiative to remove the box to identify those that were formerly incarcerated. So those that do come to us are self-disclosed. And a lot of them, depending on their level of preparedness, go on and they complete their degrees. So if they come out and they haven't yet reached their associate degrees, a lot of them try to continue on with community colleges. And again, we're not the only community college that are operating in prisons. So a lot of them do connect with the community colleges that they were working with prior. If not, it's just the colleges that are in their community. And then they really rely on those connections that they've made with that college on what the next steps should be. And when operating in a prison, there's limited degrees that we can actually offer in there. So once we connect with them, we can actually figure out, okay, do you want to complete this degree path, or did you really maybe want to become a scientist? And let's explore what that field looks like and what options are available to you. Unfortunately, some of the students are still limited, due to whatever their offense was. But what's really nice about what colleges are doing now is they're trying to be more mindful about the reentry approach. So, maybe you can't be a nurse, but have you ever thought about maybe working in the administration in a hospital, and just kind of reframing those ideas that way? We don't want to tell you no, but let's look at your goal in a different way. And so there's different organizations on campus too that are trying to, like, for example, on Bakersfield College, we have Free on the Outside, where those students kind of connect with each other and they're going to be each other's support group. So success looks very different for a lot of people. So there's going to be those that continue on with their degree. There's going to be those that maybe want to go straight into the workforce, and that's okay. And then there are those who are just, you know what, I'm okay with where I'm at right now. I'm rebuilding myself personally to get myself to where I need to be before I make my next step. So, and there's different levels that we can gauge success. But as long as our students are not reoffending, they're happy, functioning, and they're self-sustained, then that's the success in my book.
Excellent. And Dr. Roy and Dr. Robertson, did you have anything to add to that, or I can go to the next one? Okay, cool. All right, so another great question. This one's a little bit of a different approach. Lindsay Call had a question for any participant or any panelist. How much do you think about the terminology you use to refer to the clients or students who are incarcerated? Thinking about like person first, language, or not, does it matter? Is it on your mind?
Yes, Dr. Robertson, did you want to? Well, yeah, very much. I mean, and especially as an English professor, this is the kind of stuff I think about a lot. And I mean, the first thing I'll say is the one word I don't really use is inmate, because it's not a term that is liked in prison. And I think when you put a noun, nouns in that sense objectify human beings, and even prisoner I try and avoid. So I try and say incarcerated, whatever, incarcerated writer, incarcerated artist, incarcerated student. Because obviously there is a distinction we have to make from just out of practicality between a student on campus and a student in prison. But but I don't want it to be a category distinction of a different type of person. It's a person in a different context. And so I think it's very important to try and use language, as I think the question kind of said itself, that acknowledges who the person is, and then the kind of secondary term is the context of incarceration.
Yeah, I think about it very similarly. I was just going to say, like, part of that question, it only comes up for me in this context, right? When I'm actually working inside San Quentin, it's never an issue because they're just students or by name. And so, yeah, the person first language is my approach to all of these issues.
Great. Yes, I also take a similar approach in the criminal justice field when writing about people who are incarcerated. It's been a shift that we've seen in recent years as well in the literature. Excellent. So we have one specifically, I think, for Dr. Robertson from Timothy Stock. Can you speak briefly to why prison work is an important aspect of public philosophy? Why are incarcerated people's inclusion in the public important for our understanding of what that term means? And also, how does this reflect back on our understanding of disciplinary philosophy?
Okay, so I don't have a 2-minute version, but I'll, so I think like there's different meanings to the term public philosophy, right? People sometimes use it to mean prominent philosophers speaking to the public, right? Giving their ideas in a way that's accessible to the public. The sense that I'm often much more passionate about is more of like philosophers engaging with the public as philosophers, right? So asking philosophical questions together. And the idea, at least, so part of why I enjoy and think it's really valuable to do philosophical reflection with incarcerated people, they have epistemic access to things that I don't. Like, I learn a lot about the world by talking to people who are incarcerated. I bring to them the same ethics bowl cases that I use with my undergraduate UCSC students, that I've debated with other philosophers, and they often have a novel take. They've changed my mind on things, right? They say they're actually powerful thinkers to engage with. And I think part of that is their situatedness. That again, so like on issues of race and power in our culture, they often have really insightful ways of approaching it. I'll give you a very concrete example. We had an ethics bowl case on Rachel Dolezal. So if you know who she is, right, she was somebody who had an African-American identity. She was like up into like the head of an NAACP organization. And then it was discovered, a journalist posted that she was a white woman from Kansas, ethnically white, right? So she had this transracial identity, quote unquote. Students at UCSC and all the faculty I ever talked about were very dismissive of it. But the Black men on my team inside San Quentin helped me think very differently about race. They were much more sympathetic to her. And I was very surprised, and they gave really interesting arguments about kind of having sort of compassion for her, some sense of where she was coming from. And that is not something I think I would have easily gotten from the students at UCSC.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for giving us a little more information on the philosophy side. That's great. Okay, so for Angelica, Juan Avila wants to know, and we'll see if you have these numbers just off the top of your head here, but what percentage of Bakersfield College inmate scholars students are Kern County residents and will be released to Kern County? Do you have an idea?
So to be honest, I don't have those demographics. We do have a pretty good mix of individuals that return to Kern County and then those that are outside of Kern County. Some of them are even out of state. So unfortunately, I can't really provide those numbers. We do try our best to track our students once they leave. If they're identified as going to be paroling or transferred, we try to get an idea where they're going so we can at least give them the information of how we can stay connected if they need anything from Bakersfield College in regards to transcripts or information, or if they need some information to connect them to where they're going to be at. And we're trying to, Bakersfield College, we're trying to compose like an internal database, just because, again, there's no other way to capture that information. But I would say if I had to guess, and it's just a guess, an educated guess, probably about half of those populations that we serve in there are going to be released to Kern County. So a lot of it's, the Bakersfield area, McFarland, Delano, Wasco. And in fact, I just want to touch on this too, because the prisons that we serve are actually pretty close in some communities. So where they're in Wasco, 2 in Delano, and there's 2 in Kings County close to there. When we were in the private prisons, there 3 of them were right there in McFarland, and they were close to neighborhoods, close to schools. They're there. So they're embedded, and actually was to the point like you could literally walk outside, get your coffee. Hi, I guess they're out there for count. So prisons are very well and alive in our community, and those individuals that are getting released are very much there in our communities as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And this one would be for anyone who'd like to answer. Lindsay Call has another great question. Overall, how much have your programs been shaped or changed based on feedback from your students?
Well, that's a good question. And well, with the formal BA program, not a lot, simply because they're not really changed by my feedback either. It's kind of like set in stone with all these different institutional things that are just not like movable really, to much extent. But with Words Uncaged, it's totally different, and it's really just driven by them really. So like the themes of the books that we publish each year, the all different kinds of things are really driven by our incarcerated members. But with the, it's really hard to change anything with the more formal side of things, because Angelica brought it up earlier. Even like the degree that it is a series of complex negotiations within the university, with the prison, with funding, with all these kind of things, that there isn't a lot of room. And then each prison is different, but we're in a high security prison, and there's no internet access, there's no access to the college library or things like that. So everything has to be done in a kind of very laborious way, that there's no kind of feedback loop possible in there whatsoever, really.
And then I would just also like to add to, prior to COVID, part of Bakersfield College's process of, enrolling students for classes every semester is we have to go and meet with the students. So we're actually fortunate to get face-to-face interaction with them, ask them how their semester went. And we do actually look, fish for feedback too, and just say, what's something that worked this semester, what didn't work this semester. And I always ask too, I can't make any promises, but if you good guys could have a specific class that's happening on this yard, what would it be? Because realistically, these students could be in our face-to-face program, and they could also be in correspondence programs as well. And if we can offer a class that's going to help them get a degree, even if it's through another school, we're going to go ahead and do it. And a lot of times they'll request certain subjects as well. And, we always tell them we'll try, and we'll reach out to departments. And it's been successful. Like I said, over the years, there was a little bit of taboo with getting teacher buy-in, but as our program grew and we were able to retain faculty, and they can, of course, advocate about their experiences in the prison as well, we're able to get more of those teachers that teach those subjects that the students were interested in. Because before we were just only teaching communication courses towards a communication degree path, but now we have philosophy and sociology as well. We're working on finishing the pieces for other degree paths as well, which we hope to be able to continue even when we're going back to face-to-face modality. But we try to make the students a part of the process as much as we can. Even in the correspondence modality, students write to us with what they think will help improve processes, or even just trying to understand. And we still try to keep that communication open. And again, they realize the obstacles that we're dealing with as well. And always express their appreciation, and we express their appreciation too, because the only way we're going to learn how to get better is to know what their feedback is.
Sure, I'll just say briefly, yeah, that's actually how the debate program started, is it's an extracurricular program for the students inside San Quentin, and they had asked them what extracurriculars you wanted to do. Debate was one of the top vote getters, right? And that had a sort of history with incarcerated education and debate. So for instance, if you know, Malcolm X wrote about his experience doing debate when he was incarcerated. So yeah, the whole program started as a response to student interest in an extracurricular.
And what a great result that came of that. Great. So we have a couple questions that are along the same lines. Cass Shepard and Joseph Flores asked, and basically what they are asking for all of you is what advice would you give to students or faculty members who are interested in getting involved in your programming? And specifically, Angelica, there was someone from CSUB that was wondering if there are or what could be opportunities for CSUB faculty to work with the Inmate Scholars Program specifically. But for everyone, how can students and faculty be involved just generally?
So I'll go ahead and I'll jump on that first. So for faculty that are interested in getting involved, I guess I'll start with the teaching process. I definitely recommend that you reach out to our programs just so we can kind of talk about what that's going to look like first. If it's a teacher coming from another college, you do have to still apply through, Bakersfield College for a position with our college. But if you're already, through the process and currently teaching as an adjunct, all we need to do is really just work with your department to secure classes. And of course, we have training that is mandatory for faculty that are going to be coming in. We would like you to shadow our program, or shadow a class, I should say, in the program. So you can know what it's like, the experience of going inside. We also love it when they're able to connect with our faculty. I mean, we have full-time faculty that are dedicated to our program, that are great resources, that are connected with the community and CSUB. I mean, we have great faculty like Jeff Newby, Michael Mume, Brian Hirayama, and that's just a couple of the great people that we have involved. And we really want to encourage faculty engagement with each other, because that's what's really going to help them in times of what the heck am I doing here? I always tell people, I'm just the program manager. I'm facilitating it. I am no subject matter expert when it comes to teaching. I can teach you a few jokes here or there to use on your class. That'll probably get you some laughs, but that's it. But I know teaching isn't for everyone. And, sometimes maybe they're not comfortable with it, or just the restrictions. So for our teachers, they primarily teach in third watch, which is basically evening classes. And for those with family or other obligations, sometimes that's just not feasible, but there's still a place where in our program where they can still assist. We're always looking for people to help mentor or just connect with our students through either our club free on the outside, or just to get involved in special events. As I said, CDCR, would you let us hold special events where members of the BC community can be invited? So even just to be a part of that, that would be great, just to show support from the students, show them that people are generally interested in what they're doing. Or even just events on campus as well. And then just advocating for our program. These students need it. They're gonna need it on the inside and the outside. And that's the same that I would say for students that are interested in participating in our program. Even though we don't have teaching positions or tutoring positions available for them to go on the inside, we did also have events such as debates as well, where the students in our program had a debate with the main campus students, and it was really great for those students to get involved as well. So there's opportunities everywhere, and we're open to talking about it. So if anyone's interested, they can reach out to us through Bakersfield College, Angelica Perez at bakersfieldcollege.edu. I'll get you connected to where you want to be.
I'll add as well that Sacramento State is starting a BA program soon. We've been sort of somewhat in discussion with them about some things. And then I know there's been a lot of interest from Bakersfield, CSU Bakersfield. So I would also hound your own university to start, because really, you know, certainly my vision has always been from starting this, that every Cal State will serve its local prison, because they're, you know, it's, when you look at the map geographically, that's a possible reality. So I would also kind of, there are active people at, I can't remember everyone's name at CSU Bakersfield right now, that are trying to start the program there. So find out who those people are and hound your administration.
Yeah, and if you happen to be living in Northern California, I can tell you, you know, Mount Tam College is a place you can volunteer with. I would teach there more if it wasn't 2 hours away. But if you're a graduate student or a professor in Northern California, all of their faculty are volunteers, and I think it's an exceptional place to work. I also do spend time trying to convince people around the country to do Ethics Bowl, right? So other philosophers, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who might be interested in doing an Ethics Bowl program with incarcerated students. I know Michael and Nate have done one down by you, so it's not so much Bakersfield, but other places. You can find me at publicphilosophy.ucsc.edu.
Wow, excellent. And I would just like to ask, if you had to give one piece of specific advice to somebody who's going in to become an educator or be involved in similar programs as you've been involved in, what would be the best advice that you could give them?
I could start if you'd like, flip the order. Well, I'll just tell you, like, there's something that a student told me inside San Quentin my first day. I went in there and we were finishing class. He just came up and he was like, just remember, we're regular people, right? Like, regular students, don't treat us any different from the students at your own university that you're working with. And if you can just kind of tamp down your reactivity to the environment, right, and just engage with them like students, I've found that they respond, and I've had no trouble with that engagement. It's been very rich. So that's the best advice I got from one of my students inside.
Yes, I would say be transparent with your students and just be flexible. You know, you don't have to go in there with your fake life or fake persona or anything like that. You know, I go in there just letting the students know full well I'm gonna stumble over my words, I'm gonna make mistakes sometimes, and I'm not the toughest, you know, person walking out on the yard, and that's okay. This is what you get. But I think students really appreciate that transparency, and it actually opens up to building a great rapport with them, and then just to be flexible, because prison is such an unpredictable environment. But you're still going to be that person that your students look to, you know, hey, you can't get the laptop working today, so what's going to happen with our class? Because we're here, you know, for maybe 3 hours tonight or an hour and a half, and we're eager to learn, and how are we going to make this happen? So I think it's a great experience. It's going to keep you on your toes, and you're never going to get bored.
Yeah, there was a term that one of our incarcerated students created called fleximistic, combination of flexible and optimistic. And much like Angelica was saying, I think that's good, because everything goes wrong all the time, and you just have to keep going, be fleximistic.
I like that. I think that's a nice word to wrap up on. We should all be in our lives fleximistic, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. All right, so I just would like to thank the panel again and remind all the attendees, if you could please, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at the survey link that was posted in the chat in Zoom. It's the California Humanities survey link. It'd be great if you could just take a few minutes to fill that out. Shouldn't take much time at all. We'd really appreciate your feedback on this event. And also in the chat, there's some information about the panelists' programs. So if you wanted to find out some more information about their specific programs, you can check out some of those links. But thank you again, panelists. This was an amazing conversation. I feel inspired. I hope that some of our attendees are also feeling inspired as well. And yeah, thank you. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks, Callie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.